Good morning, everybody. Hope you can all hear me out there. This is Andy Barkate. I'm the president of California Retirement Plans. Most of you out there on the webinar know me. Most of your clients, but there's people part of the webinar that are not clients that are still moving in that direction. I'm going to wait just a little bit to make sure everybody else can join. But again, let me just kind of change and get our screen going. Let's go here and okay, here we go. Okay, now this is the webinar on the slide deck we're going to go through. Still a few people joining, so I just for time's sake, let's go ahead and get started. But first of all, let me kind of go through a couple of the ground rules that we have for the webinar so you kind of know what to expect. We've done these webinars in the past, and now I'm going to try to make them a monthly occurrence from this point out. They're going to be on the same day of the month as this one, the second Wednesday of the month, 9:30 West Coast time. You'll be sent emails to remind you of them. You can sign up like a lot of you did just the other day. And I'm also going to record these. This thing's being recorded. I'm going to save that and send it out to our email list, which all our clients are on, probably tomorrow. But I'm also going to put it on the website, and I'll show you where that's at in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me just tab down here. And if you've got any issues with what's going on, please, if you go down to the bottom of the webinar, you'll see a little bar. You can mouse over that bar and another bar will pop up if you're not already seeing it, and you can chat in that bar. You can send your chats in. Now, I want you to ask questions. The questions will not appear live, so nobody else will be able to see your questions. They'll be anonymous. I'll see them. I'm not going to respond to them during the webinar because, again, I want everybody to ask the questions they want. And sometimes they're a little bit more individual in nature, which won't make a lot of sense to a lot of other people. And I've done these in the past, and a lot of people don't ask questions because they don't want to appear, well, they think they're going to ask a dumb question. And there are no dumb questions. And they don't want to have people kind of know their financial affairs. And I get that, but we want to respond to the questions and actually make sure that we're getting information to you. And the whole purpose of this webinar is to keep us all up to date, and in a large part to just make sure we're communicating effectively, or maybe just use another communication source like these webinars to communicate with our clients on an ongoing basis, with the whole idea of just making sure we're up to date on things. All right. Our agenda in this slide will probably be the same as it is every month. We're going to talk about what's going on in the world, the economy that's affecting our money, either now or possibly in the future. And we're also going to talk a little bit about taxes. We at Cal Retirement try to build in tax planning into the retirement and the financial planning we do for clients. And again, that's a big part of it. And the more money you save in taxes, the more income you have to spend. So we're going to talk a little bit about taxes every month. I'm going to pick a tax idea out and kind of detail it. And in a lot of cases, most of you can use it. In some cases, maybe you can't use it yet, but it's something to maybe put in your back pocket and remember, but pull it out when it's necessary, when it will help you. Oh, and also on our website, and I'll show you where that is as well, there's a way, and a lot of you use this already, where you can actually hit a tab, look at my schedule, and set up a time to talk over the phone. And of course, everybody's welcome to come in the office like they always have. It's just about setting up a time to do it. Contact information is on the bottom. There's my email address. There's one of our phone numbers. We've got a few, but they all feed right into the office. So again, that's a way to get a hold of us, but a lot of you already know that. All right. This is the meat of our presentation today, to kind of talk about what's happening in the world that's affecting us, mainly our money. And this same slide could have been there last month and probably the month before. And more than likely next month, something very similar to this will probably also be on the in our main meat of our presentation or our talk today. Now, the Federal Reserve is tightening. Matter of fact, they're meeting right now as we speak. There'll probably be an announcement on what they're going to do with interest rates in about 2 hours. So the markets are reacting to that. Now, we all know the Federal Reserve has been increasing rates pretty much all year in their quest to tap down or push inflation back down to where they'd like it to be, which is about 2%. Right now, it's a little over 7%. Now, I've got some articles I'm going to show you in just a minute that talk about all these different subjects you see here on our agenda. And again, if you want to get the links to those articles, just let me know. And in an email or in your our comments or chat, and I'll make sure I send them to you. I'll email them to you after the webinar is done sometime this afternoon. Now, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates in their quest to tap down inflation. Now, inflation's been with us all year. A lot of people out there haven't experienced inflation since the late 70s and early 80s. It exists, but it's always been kind of low. This is a second time in my lifetime we've actually experienced inflation that really catches our attention. And more than likely, inflation is going to continue for the time being, even though recently some of the numbers coming out which suggest it's being tapped down a little bit. So again, a big part of why the markets have been more volatile is because of inflation and because of the Fed's response to inflation, raising interest rates. When they do that, they're trying to just tap down on the brakes of the economy to slow the economy down. And when they do that, typically that means the business cycle slows down, corporate earnings slow down, and stock prices typically fall. We've all painfully seen that throughout the year. Now, the third bullet point on there, the war, the one between Russia and Ukraine, I don't believe that's having a whole lot of effect recently on what the markets are doing. But earlier in the year, it did. There was a supply chain concern about what was going to happen with a lot of the oil coming out of Russia. How is that going to affect the oil market? The Ukraine is a very big ag exporter. How is that going to affect food prices? And because of those concerns, we saw both of those commodities, fuel and as well as commodities as far as food, going up in price. Now that's somewhat been dissipated, even though the war is still there. It's more of a humanitarian mess than it is an economic mess at this point, but that's probably going to continue. The real supply chain concerns are coming out of China. China has that zero COVID policy, even though they've kind of softened their views on it. Maybe the last couple of weeks, they're still very staunch in their fight against COVID outbreaks. That has caused supply chain issues in China, and still a very large percentage of the components that make up many different products are sourced out of China. A lot of meds, a lot of things in the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of things in the manufacturing industry are sourced out of China. So those COVID slowdowns are affecting that supply chain, which is causing supply chain issues, which is one of the main reasons we've got a lot of inflation. I know you've all heard of Detroit having hundreds of thousands of cars that are just sitting there that look beautiful and ready to go, except they're missing one or two components, mainly chips. But again, just one thing can cause that product to not be delivered, and that's happening, and it's happening more than just in Detroit. So as long as that persists, there's two main concerns or two main components to price: supply and demand. We all know that. Well, supply is being constricted, which is causing prices to go up because of these supply chain issues. Now, for the next bullet point, probably the most important one, and all these things are very interrelated, we're talking about today, the potential of a recession. Now, a lot of people think we might already be in one, but most people believe that if we're in one, it's very mild, and if there is some sort of a protracted recession, it probably won't start until maybe the middle of next year, maybe the latter part of next year. Now, the predictions are all over the board. And one of the great things about being an economist is you can be wrong and look very smart doing it, being wrong, in other words. But if that happens, if we do get pushed into a recession, and it might happen by the Fed raising interest rates as they are to slow down the economy, to bring down recession, but as they slow down the economy, they could easily overshoot that and push us into some sort of mild recession, if not even something a little bit more deep than that. And that would cause the business cycle to slow down. It would cause the labor market to slow down. It would cause corporate earnings to slow down, which would cause stock prices to drop. And mainly stock prices are a product of what the belief is in future corporate earnings. If the belief is that corporate earnings are going to go up in the future, stock prices are going to go up to reflect that, and vice versa on the downside. So if it looks like the economic trend is going to be softening and corporate profits may be waning, you'll see stock prices reflect that going the wrong direction, which they've been doing off and on all year. So again, watch that recession. It looks like it's in the cards. A lot of very smart people believe that it's going to happen sometime next year. But again, when is the big thing? Economics is a science, but it's very inexact. we can look at things and say that we can predict things are going to happen. You just can't predict the severity of them, and you can't predict the timing. So I'm going to switch gears and go to some of the things I've got saved I wanted to show you. Let's stop here, go back here to share my screen again, and go here. Well, here's our website. A lot of you have seen that, but I wanted to show you again, where you're going to be able to find this webinar when we got on the website is under the media and education part of the website. Just mouse over and go down to TV, to webinars, Now you'll find it listed there. Now, also, I mentioned you could actually set up a phone appointment with us whenever you want. If you bang on that button, it's going to take you to my calendar. So you'll see the times I've got available to sit down and have a phone conversation. We do this all the time. And a lot of you have currently been doing this for probably well over a year or so, but I wanted to bring that up because that's a good way to communicate with us. Now, let me go back to, here's an article I found the other day, literally yesterday, on inflation, excuse me. And this talks about some of the consumer price numbers coming up just a couple of days ago, which were a little bit better than expected. And excuse me, there's a siren going on in the background. A lot of you have been in the office, and we have the ambulances coming by here all the time. So I apologize for that. A little bit noisy. But this is talking about about inflation somewhat coming down. And that's one reason why the market was up about 500 points the other day, is on the perception that the Federal Reserve, in seeing that inflation is waning a bit, may be less apt to be aggressive, or maybe more apt to be more less aggressive in their increasing in interest rates in the future. So that's what that was thought of. Now, I've also got, excuse me, let me tab up to the top of this thing. You've got how the war in Afghanistan is affecting the economy. Now, it's looking at a lot of economies, but if you want this, you can actually tab down a bit, and it'll go to how it affects the U.S. economy. It talks about inflation. It talks about the money we've spent, and that's only partial of that part of the money. But again, it'll give you an idea how the war could affect the economy in the future, hence our money. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the next one. This talks a little bit about China and their lockdowns and about a lot of the protests that were going on in China the last couple of weeks because of those lockdowns. And that's probably one reason why you've seen this zero COVID policy in China somewhat relaxed a bit. And again, that's good news for the economy. Supply chains may be a little bit unsnarled, which again will help equalize prices and maybe help inflation come down a bit. Plus, it'll help companies make money, because you can't make money if you can't sell your product, and you need all the parts to be able to get that product on the market. This is let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Wrong direction. This is an article, actually it's an article from my favorite living economist, Brian Westbury. I've read his stuff for the last 20 plus years. He's an economist for First Trust. He sends out something every week, and I get it and read it religiously. This is what came out last week. And I wanted to bring your point to, I mentioned earlier that a lot of very smart people believe we're going to go into a recession. We just don't know when. He is one of them, and I pay attention to him because he's been right an awful lot of times. So I do listen to him and give it a lot of weight. And he mentions here that the U.S. economy is probably headed for a recession. We're just not in one yet. Nothing at all in the recent data changes our minds about that happening. We just don't know quite when it's going to start. Is it going to be the second half of the year? Is it possibly going to start earlier next year, or maybe even be pushed off into early 2024? But again, if we have that mediocre economic growth and it spilling over into a recession, the rest of the article talks about how that might affect the economy. So I'll be happy to get this article to you. And I do believe that anybody can actually sign up to get these. So if you are inclined to read a little bit and kind of increase your depth of knowledge about the markets and the economy, it's a relatively short read. It's one page usually maybe a 5 or 10 minute read. And after reading a handful of them, you'll kind of get a gist of where he's headed. And again, it just makes you a little bit more adept to making decisions, seeing what's happening. And after all, this is all about trying to give everybody good information, and he's a great source. Okay, now let's go back to the webinar. Let's go back. I'm going to stop the screen share and go back there. Oh, come on. Now let's flip. Okay. We all know a lot of the things that last slide discusses affect our money. It affects the market, affects bonds, stocks, interest rates, all those things work together. Now, because of that, we've had a very volatile stock market and also a very volatile bond market. So I'm going to change screens again and kind of highlight those. All right, let's go back here. This, I hope you can see it. I hope it's coming up clear. This is a chart of the S&P 500 from the beginning of the year till now. And I can see the trajectory is pretty much down, even though we've had some spikes that have come up. The point I wanted to bring out is the fact interest rates are going up and pushing the possibility for corporate earnings to fall and stock prices to fall with them is obviously what's been happening. It's not unusual to have false rallies during a bear market, during a bad market period. And this is what I wanted to bring up. We saw the market peak literally just about Christmas last year, and it pretty much fell. We had a little bit of a false rally there. Everybody thought, okay, maybe it's over. We're going to go back up. It didn't. It fell again. We had another rally that went up there. It fell hard again. So we've had 4 or 5 false rallies, and we just had another, what appears to be a false rally occurring and unfolding right now. Even though you can see in the top left-hand corner, the S&P is up about 21 points, and the Dow is up close to 200 right now. But that's an anticipation of what the Fed is going to possibly do today. Now, the thing I really wanted to make a point of is it's very usual for a declining market to have false rallies in it. We may have more, we don't know yet. Nobody has a crystal ball on these things. And the point I wanted to bring up is eventually that rally is going to stick. It's not going to be a false rally. It's going to be the real deal. And the market will climb out of this mess that we're in. Now, is that going to happen next week or next year? You can flip a coin just like I can. However, my point is, in talking to a lot of people, which we do every single day, a lot of clients, a lot of potential new clients, everybody's worried about this. And a lot of people want to sit on the sidelines. And I get that. That's the real inclination you have when the market is potentially going in the wrong direction. All you hear is bad news. And the talking heads are typically, well, they're trying to get your attention. So a lot of the information you're getting has been very sensationalized and possibly, just wrong. It gets you thinking negatively. But my point is, you probably never want to be completely 100% in the market, or probably never 100% out of the market. Now, when the market does go back up in earnest, when we don't know what that is or when that is, we don't want to be completely out, because that first move up usually is a nice solid move up, and it happens pretty quickly. And if you're sitting on the sidelines, you're going to miss that, and you'll miss a big part of the comeback to gain back what you might have lost earlier in the year. The catch is you want to set yourself up to where you're limiting maybe potential downside in the future, but also having a couple of toes in the market. So when the market does come back, you're going to participate to a certain degree. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and most of your accounts are set up for that. But I wanted to kind of bring that up to say, yes, you never probably want to be completely out, because when that market goes back up again, you're going to probably be left in the dust, and you're going to wonder, when can I get back in? And sometimes those are the famous last words, because again, the market might not give you much of a chance to get back in. So now, having said that, I also want to talk about the bond market right here. This is a chart of the 20-year Treasury, the price. It's a terrible chart. I mentioned earlier, as interest rates go up, the treasuries fall. Treasury bonds go down. Now, until the beginning of this year, if you go back historically, 30 years, interest rates have slowly fallen over that 30-year period, meaning by and large, bond prices have been pretty solid and rising. Well, we all know that interest rates can't go down forever. We knew they were going to go up again. We here at Cal Retirement, our investment team, have been negative on bonds for over a year. So we're happy about the way that's turned out. Most everybody's portfolio that we deal with on the investment side through our investment team hasn't been around bonds at all for the last year. So again, it wasn't that we were smart. It's just that that interest rates aren't going to go down forever. And when they start going back up, bond prices are going to fall. And that's the 20-year Treasury bond. It fell all year. It's bounced up a little bit towards the last month or two, but by and large, it's been going down. A lot of you out there may still have money at other places where you're in bonds. And you've probably seen this happen, your bond prices as part of your portfolio falling. And what we've seen happen this year hasn't happened in roughly 25 or 30 years, both the stock and the bond market falling at the same time. Usually when the stock market falls, you'll see bond prices become a little bit more solid because, again, people are running to safety. They're buying bonds and keeping the prices up in bonds. Well, this go around didn't work that way. We had the price of stocks falling because of inflation and rising interest rates. We also had the price of bonds falling for the same reason. And again, we haven't had rising interest rates and inflation for roughly 30 years. So now we've seen them. So a lot of you out there that may have that old 60-40 or 50-50 split between stocks and bonds, you've been painfully aware that both those asset classes are gone the wrong direction. And the way to kind of fight that, I guess, is to make sure that your allocations are set up to where you've got some downside protection. And we tend not to use bonds. We tend to use more fixed accounts because we get a decent rate of return. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute too. But you don't have stock market exposure. And then the stock market exposure you have, through our investment team, we're trying to use areas that are less prone to market volatility. So you can build in the ability to still have some growth when the market comes back, but have that built-in buffer, so to speak, when the market falls, that you're going to be a little bit insulated when those, if and when those happen down the road. Let me change back. I got to jump quick to go to our taxes. I told everybody I'd try to be here about 20 minutes, and we're already at 21 minutes. So let me stop here. Go back to our, and I wanted to bring up something else before we moved on. Fixed rates. Rates have gone up. So we've seen interest rates, fixed interest rates finally come up to a point to where they're at least a bit exciting to talk about. We're finding CDs, money market accounts, fixed annuities, all in that 3, 4, 5% range, fixed for anywhere from, well, sometimes they're completely liquid. You can get the money out anytime. Sometimes there's fixed rates that may last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. But you've got those fixed rates, and we're using them more and more as part of the allocations we've got for clients' accounts. So just kind of keep that in mind, that if you've got money sleepy, sitting in banks, sitting in money market accounts that are paying next to nothing, and the money market rates we're seeing are mid threes, and they're safe. They complete liquidity, and we're seeing fixed rates 4, 4.5, and maybe a little over 5%, depending on the term you go. So getting some of that sleepy money to actually work for you is something that we've not really been able to even talk about for the last 10 plus years. Well, now it's back a little bit, so take advantage of it while rates are where they're at. Okay. I mentioned I wanted to talk about taxes. Now, our subject this week is qualified charitable deductions, or QCDs. Now, this is something that you do with money in an IRA. You have to be over 70 years to use it, 70 years old. So a lot of you listening may not be there, but you will be. And you possibly know people that are. So this is very unknown. So if you know people that are that age and they're charitably inclined, giving money to church, giving money to charities, tell them about this, because again, this will be a way they can actually get a tax deduction with those charitable deductions. So it's got to be an IRA or an inherited IRA you can do it with. The money is non-taxable if you take it from the IRA and give it to charity. And again, the money goes directly to the charity, and there's really no need to itemize, to have your deductions itemized. Most people can't do that anymore, so they just have that standard deduction. So by doing that, if you're giving money to charity, you completely lose the deduction. So let me I guess change gears and kind of give you an example. Let's say, for example, you give on average $10,000 to charity every year. Could be more, could be less. If you itemize, meaning your itemized deduction, which are charitable contributions, maybe doctor bills, healthcare bills, maybe interest on your mortgage. If that's over your standard deduction, which right now between husband and wife is somewhere between $26,000 to $27,000 a year, and the vast majority of people don't get there with their itemized deductions. You don't need to itemize. You got the standard deduction, and it's a better deal for you. You save more money tax-wise. But by doing that, if you give money to charity, you don't get the write-off. Now, in 2022, there is no charitable deduction. Last year it was $300, big deal. Now it's none unless you're itemizing. So if you're not itemizing, which is most people probably on this call, and you give money to charity, you can actually pull it out of your IRA under the QCDs, give it to your church, give it to the charity, and then that money coming out of the IRA is not taxable. So in a lot of cases, you that are maybe over 72 have to take those required minimum distributions. The QCD counts towards that. Let's say your RMD, your required minimum distribution is, say it's $15,000 a year, depending on how much money you've got in your retirement accounts, but you give 10 to charity. Well, that 10 coming out of the IRA as a QCD can be part of that $15,000 of money that you give to the charity, but you're not going to pay tax on it. Instead of having the money come out of the IRA forced upon you and have you pay tax on it, you can use it as part of the way you give money to charitable causes, and now you're not going to pay tax on that money coming out of the IRA. So you in fact get that deduction. And again, let's just use normal tax rates. If you live in California, that $10,000 that you're not paying tax on can literally save you maybe somewhere between $2,500 to maybe $4,000. So it's worth taking a look at. Now, the one catch here, I got to mention this. You don't take the money out of the IRA, then decide you want to write a check to the charity. It doesn't work that way. The IRS doesn't trust us that much. The money's got to come from your IRA custodian, whoever's ever holding the IRA money, directly to the charity. And you're basically telling the charity, telling the IRA custodian, I want you to take a QCD, if there's paperwork involved, and they will in turn send the money to your church, send it to your favorite charity. You're not taxed on that IRA distribution. So again, does you have anything else on this? No, I'm almost done. The idea is to be able to spend money the way you are currently spending money, but now just get a tax advantage in doing it. So that QCD allows you to do that. So if you're not 70, you'll be there eventually. And you will probably do know people who are in that age range, and mention this to them. I promise you, I'd say 4 out of 5 people will probably never have heard of this. It's been around a while, but it's one of those things you don't discover. Somebody usually tells you it's available, then you can go and do some homework on it. And we'd be happy to answer any questions. So in conclusion, thanks for the time today. Probably expect the unexpected in the future still, because what the Federal Reserve is going to do and what inflation is going to do is still not completely resolved. Recession's a real possibility, which will mean the market's going to be probably volatile because of that. Stay on your toes, ask questions, contact us anytime you wish, and we'll sit down and talk about your concerns, well, face-to-face or either on the phone or through some kind of virtual meeting like we're doing now. And just remember, our next meeting, our next webinar is going to be the second Wednesday of next month, which I believe is going to be January 11th. So you'll be getting a call, or actually an email, I should say, and just to remind you of that. But again, thanks for the time. I appreciate it. If you have questions, please send them in the chat. Give us a call if you'd prefer doing that. And thank you, and have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas.